I will introduce two more abbreviations to you, VUCA and SDG. And I do that for a reason, because we are living in a world that looks VUCA, and we are looking also at possible solutions, and they are called SDGs. And together they will create what we call an inclusive value chain that moves all the way from the small to the international global companies. And maybe you heard also, I'm into international business. Where are we? We are here, meaning we are everywhere. I feel comfortable about that. Hopefully you will in the next 15 minutes. What I will do is the following. I will first explain what VUCA means. VUCA is a term introduced a while ago by the American Military College in order to grasp the world. The military college in the US is supposed to deal with world developments. And they said, well, if we want to take care, we want to look at world developments, it is a volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous world. That was before Trump, so don't worry. So they were their predictive value of this model was immense. Because you know, of course, it's not only Trump, it is a way of countervailing powers, of global developments, of trade, of investment patterns, of expansion, but also retreat, and everything at the same time in real life. So when I talk also with business people, smallholders, but also big corporations, you can say, okay, that's interesting. That's a theoretical problem. It's complexity. That's, by the way, there's theory about that. Complexity theory, system theory. So what? So we can, well, then the researchers will say more research is needed. And you have to do it with us, of course. But that's the real world. The real world is complex, uncertain, volatile, and ambiguous. And it is increasingly ambiguous. So the theory has to be adjusted all the time. So that's the basic philosophy behind this word. So hopefully after today, if you understand VUCA, it's not a curse, but it's a real thing. And we try to study it. And I know we try to study, but also you have to work with it. So under the influence of so-called fourth industrial revolution, the world has become increasingly multilateral. So whereas in the past the US ruled the world, the hegemonic power, they don't do that anymore. The Chinese are upcoming, the Europeans are somewhere in the middle, where does it leave the Philippines? Is it the South Chinese Sea or the West Filipino Sea, for instance? Just to mention, I will not intervene in your domestic activity, but have a look. So we have an age of change. It hampers the way organizations, leaders, people can make decisions. And we tend to think of this as something special, but actually in the past it was there as well. But it was slightly more predictable. Okay. So, what we see droughts, we see poverty, we see grand challenges, we see health issues, globalization. We see also a complex world, and we say that, you can see that, you can empathize with that. So, what do we see? We see complexity, we see problems mounting. We even see a conference room that is partly empty because of climate change. I think we accept that. Some people deny that. So this is one of the problems of a VUCA world. And that's the next slide, because actually VUCA leads to bystander effects. And the bystander effects are we see someone drown, we know they are drowning, there are lots of people around the pond, and we don't do anything. It's even worse. The more people around the pond, the less action is taken, because that's what we call the bystander effect. We think, well, somebody else should do it. Or maybe not because we don't like to take the responsibility, but because we think somebody else is more capable to do it. Or it's even worse. Well, you think I can do it, but maybe I get drowned as well if you know what the problem of drowning is. The bystander effect looks very real for us, but at the global scale it is real also, because we look at global change, we look at climate change, and we look at them as sort of collective action problems, and basically we turn our back on that. Now, not because we're bad people, but actually because the complexity of the problem creates something what we call choice paralysis. So what does it mean? The choice paralysis is the rabbit on the road. You know the story? This is not a road, but a highway. Very heavy traffic, unlike Manila. No, the traffic is heavy in Manila, but it doesn't go. The road that I'm talking about is a highway where actually the cars drive fast. The rabbit crosses the street, and at the middle of the street, the rabbit realizes, this is dangerous. This is life-threatening. What does the rabbit do? Well, we know, maybe you know, there is a traditional human behavior. You either flee, you fight, or you freeze. And the rabbit that is life-threatened is freezing, as we all do in the prospect of two complex problems. The problem with the rabbit is, of course, on the road, you freeze, but you also die. That's what happens. So we also die in many respects, or we are faced with complex issues like poverty, like value chains, like all those issues that we are facing. And many of us say this is too complex, including scientists. Let's theorize about that, make it simple, and then see the world. The world doesn't abide to our theories, the world should change, not our theories. So we are, luckily, as Cynthia also said, we are in a new phase. Let's see what the next slide is, yes. So because VUCA also creates opportunities. Because actually we know from what we see also that it doesn't work. Negative frames do not work. So what else? Well, luckily we have something, and this is called the SDGs. This is the second abbreviation. These are the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, or the global goals. And one way or another, don't worry, this was not a sort of planned exercise. In 2015, all the countries in the world more or less subscribed to this. 193 countries subscribe to the Sustainable Development Goals. It is, by the year 2030, we find it as a global community unacceptable that there will be people living in poverty. Not just poverty as a $1.25 a day sort of, but poverty in all its forms. And then the agenda moved forward. We said, well, we also think that hunger shouldn't be there. We think that everybody, that's SDG 3, should have access to health, education, gender equality, that's 5, water and sanitation, all the way down to climate change and institutions and the like. And they created 17 goals. What is different for the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, compared to, say, older ways of looking at development, the Millennium Development Goals before that, for instance? The big issue is the global community participated in that procedure. So it was the stakeholder engagement at a global scale. So 3 years of what we call multi-sector, multi-stakeholder engagement process actually created this. So, and multi-stakeholder engagement was governments, which is the traditional way of looking at this, business, which is quite new, NGOs, that was relatively old, knowledge institutes, that was quite new, and they created this. And then people would say, okay, this is too much, too complex. Again, so we have the complexity of the VUCA world, we get paralyzed, we have action plans, but many people would say that's too complex. Well, I can tell you, and this is what we see also around the world, it's not that complex at all. Because actually with these 17 Sustainable Development Goals, there is an action plan. So let me see whether I can move a little bit faster forward. Because now you have VUCA and you have the SDGs. VUCA is based on negative frames, on rivalry, competition. Also on this whole idea that every human being likes to reverse loss. So we don't want to take risks. Or we have the SDG agenda where it basically says we go for the common goods. We go for collaboration, for positive sum games, not negative or zero sum games. Yeah, your gain is my loss. That's what we have in the international trade discourse at the moment. I'm not mentioning names, but you know who I'm referring to. It's about opportunity seizing, and it's about what we call the partnering era. So we have two visions, two global visions. Now we are here in the right side, not that we say we are going just for positive outcomes But actually, the two are related. This is where the question mark comes. You cannot just say, okay, I don't know, so let's the rabbit on the road, you are on the road, let's collaborate. You see, the rabbit wants to collaborate with the cars or with the regulators. So you have to come up with some real alternatives also. So that is where I think this conference also, this project, everything we try to achieve, we are doing that. And I can tell you, we are not trying to do that in a dynamic way only. My institute, the Rotterdam School of Management, actually adopted the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, as the leading motto of our institute. That's something for a business school, because normally we would say it's about profit maximization or whatever. And we found out that already 10 years ago that business is not about profit maximization, it's about value creation. And of course, to do that, you need profits in order to have a sustainable return on investment. It's the other way around. So this is what actually is the big statement of today. It's not looking at the negative side. It's looking at the positive side, and the positive side actually is the first step you have to make. You have to start investing, you have to start thinking about the future, and then you have to start thinking about the real needs of people, not marketing products and then try to sell as much as possible. Even my marketing professor colleague, I'm not into marketing, understands that now. He said after we changed our motto as a university, he said, hey, this is interesting. As an academic, I'm more stimulated to think about marketing as creating value for people than as marketing, as selling as much as possible. And even the best marketing trick is, of course, that you sell something nobody wants, but everybody buys. Call it an iPod or something. Wow. Or even worse, because iPod is something, got cigarettes. That's what the marketing profession is all about. So we have the SDGs, and the SDGs are 17, and we will not talk about that in detail today, but there are 5 basic principles. We call it the 5 Ps. The 5 Ps are about people, planet, prosperity, peace, and then the 5th one is actually the one that I consider to be the most important one, not because it is a goal in itself, but it's sort of the means, the facilitator for everything. That's the partnering stuff, the collaboration. Now, most people would say partnering is only a means, but for many areas, and we see that in the project, and we will talk about that today also, it is also a goal in the sense that if you don't know exactly where you want to go, you have the idea, you want to solve poverty, for instance, but you don't know exactly the road, it's better to go together then. So this is an African proverb, if you want to go fast, go alone, if you want to come far, go together. And if you know what your destination is, that is what the Sustainable Development Goals are so important for. That's what is also stimulating for companies, because I will tell you in a second also that most of the big companies in the world, including many of the Filipino companies, have adopted the SDGs. There's one little problem. They don't know how to do it. That's where we come in. But also stakeholders come in, because actually nobody knows how to do it. But we know that we should do it together. That is important. And that's not a weak point. Actually, we see that time and again. That's the strength. The strength of partnering actually means we know the goal, we know who should participate, and together we change this. That's where the stakeholder involvement and action research becomes really important, so that we not as academics stand beside and say, okay, this doesn't work. And no, this doesn't work either. So go back to real life. And then after 5 years we publish about this in a journal or whatever. That's utterly uncooperative also from academia. So we are really reinventing academia as well. And not just the economist, Cynthia. Anyway. So from negative to positive frames. This is the statement of the world of the UN. Now, we the people. If you go to the website, you will see the we the people is a phrase also used in order to move beyond the bystander effect. We the people are we the people. And nobody should be left behind. That's one of the Sustainable Development Goals. But we should be all included. And that's of course what the inclusive business and the inclusive value chain philosophy comes from. Again, it's not that we know how to do it, it's that we want to do it, we know that it is important. And actually, I put here a picture of Mr. Fowler. And fortunately, in the last 10 years, even economists, this is the Nobel Prize winner economics of last year, he has this insight. Positive change, behavioristic. So they invented the fact that economics is not about theory, but it's about behavior. It's about relationships. It's not about markets, but about relationships. It's not about rational behavior, but irrational, or what they call bounded rational behavior. Anyway, this is an internal discussion, by the way, but nevertheless, we are making head. So, creating the combination between VUCA and SDG. I hope you now have the abbreviations ready. I will check it at the end of the day. It's about wicked problems, but also wicked opportunities. It's about a new development paradigm, and that relates to what we call inclusive business, inclusive growth. And just a few remarks on that. This is not something that we invented. Actually, I put here the International Monetary Fund, the World Economic Forum, and a booklet also that will be announced this day. Everybody agrees upon that, and it's solid research. Finally, the economists have covered 150 countries over the last 20 years, and what did we find? Inclusive growth. It starts with inclusion, and it creates growth, not the other way around. That's important, because we tend to look at the other way around. First growth, and then we call it trickle down. It worked. It doesn't work. So that's the macro story. Then the question is, how do we make it work? This is some slides to say it's about open, it's about balance, inclusive, positive change. It's goal-oriented. And it's complexity resilient. Don't shy away from complexity, because that's the real world. Every manager knows that. Any manager that gives me one tip in order to change things, is not a good manager, to be honest. Every manager that says, it's so complex we cannot do anything, that's also not a very good manager. So somewhere in between, we have to get together. So it's a trade-off. That's the basic philosophy also of the whole research that we did in EMIT 1, we call it. It's about competitiveness, so you have to be competitive, and it's about inclusiveness. And it seems to be that inclusiveness in a sort of sequence of investment decisions and is more important than even competitiveness. But what we see is that the more inclusive you can become in a smart way of managing, so don't worry, it's not just being inclusive that solves everything. It's slightly more difficult the more competitive you become. And the trade-off is managed then through partnerships. So, the agenda is there. Actually, if you look at the SDGs, you look at the inclusive development and the inclusive business here. It's no poverty, gender, income inequality, cities, production change, partnering, it's there. Everything is about inclusive. Actually, we call it also, and you can link it up to the other SDGs, and they're all there, we call it inclusive green growth. So it's not just inclusive socially, but it needs to be also green. So that's the agenda. So, you will not be able to read this, but just to show you that we do our homework, this is what we do with a number of big companies. Maybe you see that, Unilever, IKEA, Safaricom, Philips. It's just a list, and it's put also in a little booklet also, where you see all these companies are reframing their motto. So Unilever says, I want to reach 1 billion people to improve their health. Of course they sell soap, but that's part of the story. Philips says, one of my Dutch companies also, we want to reach 3 billion people in the world to create a bigger access to health and to a number of other things. So these are global companies, but you can imagine what that means. And they don't say 3 billion people by the year 2050, they say 3 billion people by the year 2020. And they have now quarterly profit statements, of course, because they're a public company, but they also have quarterly SDG statements, where they try to keep track of this. And it's utterly so it looks quantitative, 3 billion, but it's very qualitative. And behind that you can imagine there's a whole value chain, an innovation strategy and the like. And you can see that happening all around the world. So we are very positive about that. In order to support that, that's I already said, we wrote this booklet for the Rotterdam School of Management, where we shared with you. We have now made also a copy for the C4C project, where we basically say the SDGs are a $21 trillion opportunity for business annually. And it's very easy. If people are not poor, they become consumers. It's a market. It's an opportunity. If people are healthier, they'll live longer, etc., etc. You can see the story, and it's just breaking through a number of these barriers that we see on a global scale, and one of the aims of the project, of course, to make that work also in more concrete terms. It's about, you can link it to national growth policies. Almost all the countries in the world now embrace inclusive growth, one way or another, but they don't know how to do it. At least some of the government officials here, I hope you don't mind that I simplified the statement. Don't know how to do it mean how to select companies that are really serious about how then to frame policies and to intervene and to... Actually, this is an ongoing debate also in policy areas. It requires a transition also that companies move from reactive to more proactive, which is not easy for companies. Also for NGOs, it's not easy. It is partnering. It is what we call filling the trust gap with positive action. We live in a low trust society. I say we live in a, so not you, the Philippines, but the world. The trust in business, for instance, is lower than ever to do something good. I think it's 15% trust. There's only one actor in society that has a lower trust. You know who? Government. In general. So we're not talking about the Philippines. Don't worry. We're in my country as well. Partnering, by the way, it has a higher trust. Okay, I'll wrap up also. So we try to look at the portfolio, and then we try to look at what I call new licenses to operate. So actually, many companies don't even have a license to exist. They just sell bad products. That's something already. Then what we are looking at now, what we call stakeholder management, is we call the license to operate together with others. But one of the most important parts is what we call the license to experiment, where you move on, you develop new products, new value chains. You also require a license, and you need stakeholders, you need partnerships. So that is what we looked also at this project. So my final slide is actually, we started already. Yesterday, the 17th of July, we started with 6 of the lead companies of the Philippines. And you see their names there. I'm not allowed to mention the names for marketing reasons. I'm an independent university, of course, but they are the companies that said, well, okay, we want to join forces also. We want to learn from each other. We want to learn from insight from universities. And this is a 1-year engagement process where we do what we call an executive training. But you also see the little yellow spot downstairs, down the slide. There's still some room for some other lead companies, and you're happily invited. But time is running up because we have already had the first session. In November we have the second session, and by June next year, all these companies will outcompete everybody else in terms of inclusive business.
So thank you for your attention and good luck.